Jason's getting ready for practice, getting ready for the weekend, but we cannot start this discussion without discussing what happened. Hashtag Magic of the Cup last night. And that's what we've been spending the first half hour of the show on this morning. And I was trying to liken it to the college basketball tournament where early round you have, like, if one day is calm, the next day is chaos. And we had that with Tuesday, Wednesday, where Tuesday was calm and open cup, Wednesday was nuts.
Yeah, Wednesday had some interesting moments. I don't know if any are more interesting than the hot mic in Hartford. Wow. To the point that someone grabs the mic and basically like gives the soliloquy on the mic about the
Oh.
decisions that they disagreed with. At least that person did not drop some colorful language. Others did.
Yes.
I'd love to know the individuals who were involved, and I think some of them might have been on the field. I'm not sure.
Uh-huh.
Just absolute chaos. And then we had a goalkeeper sent off, and we weren't sure that they were actually sent off for a
Correct.
while.
Correct.
That was another surprising one. And now we're left with a tournament that is going to be really interesting in how they break up the bracket regionally, because it doesn't really fit well.
No.
And for the first time in really a long time, it's actually tilted to more teams Midwest and West than on the Eastern side. So, where do you put Atlanta, which is the easternmost MLS team in the bracket? Do they go up into the Northeast? Does Pittsburgh get lumped in with Atlanta? Or do they go to Florida? And, then you've got Tormenta really close by. You've got Birmingham really close by. Are they actually matched close by or not? Charleston, who we always see in the Open Cup. I don't know. I don't know how they break it up. And there's going to be people who are big mad about it. And welcome to the magic of the Cup.
Well, but, we have maintained, and Jarrett, before he did his first Irish goodbye this morning, as a public service, and we know how the Open Cup likes to just pay attention to the hue and cry of the soccer fan. You have to have Atlanta United and Tormenta in Paulson Stadium. That is the bottom line. That should be written in stone for the next round.
I don't know if Paulson is wide enough. That's the question. I'd love to find out. I would love to see a spectacle like that. It would be amazing. I'm concerned about the width of the pitch at Paulson. Um, I look. I mean, we've talked about the Open Cup plenty over the years, and I've told my story with it. I've been involved in teams that tried to qualify back in the day and had to go through the USASA regional qualifying. Back then, it was over Memorial Day weekend, and you'd have to go play 4 games in 3 days, and just stupid nonsense, and trying to get through it. And we got into it one time and had a epic night in Charleston with some of the most questionable referee decisions I've ever seen. Um, I love the tournament, and I think it does need to be re-envisioned to a degree because of the calendar, not purely from an MLS perspective, across the board, that we all have to deal with. The amateur teams have had to change their approach a little bit, and I think they needed to, away from purely the summer amateur teams that are college players essentially, to more of the year-round amateur teams. And you have a rise in year-round amateur play, and a lot of that's been led by the UPSL. Also, the local regional leagues that have been around for a long time. So the tournament is more of a year-round thing. They need to find the spots in the calendar to make it work. And yes, everybody needs to be involved in it. And if teams, as we talked about earlier this calendar year, teams at the professional level, and this isn't purely an MLS conversation because there's USL teams that are going to be in this boat too. If they have to, in essence, punt because of injuries, because of schedule congestion, because of lack of form, whatever, okay, they should be able to do that with the roster that they can present to play in the tournament. If that means calling up academy players, if that means playing reserve, they need to be able to do that. I think the one thing that is a bigger picture conversation that will affect the Open Cup is the ability for professional teams, and I know USL can do this, so USL League One can do this. We've seen it in MLS Next Pro as well. Academy players need to be able to play in this tournament across the board without having any effect to their college eligibility. So at MLS level, that needs to be available as well to teams. And if you can do that and you can call up reserves as, separate from the short-term agreements that are in place right now in the CBA with the Players Association, if you can work those out to where MLS teams have more flexibility in their roster, which they should, then there should not be a question about their participation in the tournament. And then we get more of these crazy things that we all love about it. We're sickos when it comes to this. And the first rule to me of being a sicko is you have to recognize that you're a sicko.
Oh, of course.
Not everyone is a sicko. And I think you see that. I mean, we watched the game in Hartford and NYC too. There was hardly anybody there. There were other games. There was hardly anybody there. These rounds, for the most part, there have been great stories like Vermont and others. These rounds are for the sickos.
Mm-hmm.
When you get later in the tournament and a trophy is on the horizon, things change a little bit. And for anybody who watches cup competitions in other countries, that's pretty much a normal routine. That's not abnormal that this is how it goes. So get the roster rules in place. Everybody needs to participate, but with the ability to be flexible with your roster. And let's go and grow this thing even more, because last night, those are the nights that the sickos anyway really love about it. And sometimes we can convert the casual fans to sickos and anything can happen.
Yeah, it was absolutely crazy last night. I think that our group at SDH, I think we watched at least 9 of the 11 matches last night and left the West Coast to themselves.
Yeah, I couldn't make it through the West Coast. I was really focused on the Tormenta Miami match, the Chattanooga Red Wolves Birmingham match. I was staying on those for the most part, keeping up with Carolina and North Carolina as well. And then once I heard about the hot mic at Hartford, I had to
We all went over and caught up with Hartford
yeah,
and
that
NYC.
was special.
And you get your flashbacks with Romario and Anderson Asayadu, who are now playing for Hartford.
And that's the other thing about the tournament, and those are the things that I love. There was a lot of hype about Sasha Kleshchen and Des Moines, and then more guys being recruited. We saw that in the FA Cup back in the day and in the earlier rounds. I remember Brian McBride playing for a team that I think Budweiser sponsored, that had a bunch of former pros that tried to enter into the early rounds that didn't get very far. It happens. It's a gimmick. That's not going to sustain the tournament. But seeing guys like Romario Williams and Anderson Asayadu that you're like, hey, those are former Atlanta United guys. Cool, I'm going to watch some of this game.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the little hooks that are good. These are guys who are making a living in the game and playing for a team that, man, they kind of melted down at the end of it. I can't say I necessarily blame them because that game was all over the map. But, yeah, that Hartford team, did they end up with 8? Or did they
it was 9.
9. I think it probably should have been 8.
Well, and when you have CSB event staff surrounding the center ref,
and they're done that,
and so it is. That was definitely with hot mic and chaos and CSB event staff hanging around, folks. Yeah, the magic of the cup last night was off the rails. You're getting ready for, I believe, a practice observation. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Madison is checking out Atlanta United 2 right now. They play Sunday at 3:00. We'll have that on the SDH network on Mixlr. And then we'll both head up and watch first team training. We'll speak to Thiago Almada and Gonzalo Pineda today on the first team side of things. And on the second team, I think we're going to talk to Karim Tamimi and perhaps a couple more.
Okay, so I've got that coming up. So I know that I've got maybe 10 more minutes with you before you have to duck back outside. Yeah. Philly's in the rearview mirror. The injuries that took up it takes up a full screen when it comes to TV news. But once again, you got to see why Daniel Rios was picked up to be a part of the organization. Noah Cobb continued to impress. and Luis Abram steps right in, and I believe it was was it 6 blocks by Luis? Some insane number on Sunday with the folks that stepped in. Next man up. It was why these folks were here.
Yeah, Luis was more physically aggressive than I'm used to seeing, which was good. And look, he's trying to get into the Peruvian national team for Copa America, so he's got a lot of motivation right now. Noah Cobb, I think, getting a consistent run of games, we just see him look more and more confident, especially on the ball, every time out. I thought this was the Caleb Wiley game, and this is the kind of performances that Caleb Wiley can give you. The goals are always a bonus when we're talking about him and we're talking about fullbacks, and I think this is the trajectory that young, exciting fullbacks usually go on. And I think Caleb is actually ahead of the curve in this because and look, Alphonso Davies is kind of the model for this that we've seen in this league, where you think he's going to project as a fullback. You want to get him on the field early as a winger, protect him a little bit. Atlanta did that with Wiley. I think Wiley has improved defensively dramatically. And all those minutes that he got in 2022, and look, not by design, injuries caused it. You had points where you didn't have any fullbacks available outside of Wiley. Those minutes and those mistakes have helped him turn into the player that he is, along with just the natural growth, because man, he's a brick wall right now. Literally, guys bounce off of him. And when he can, now that he has put that focus and that time and that energy into being a top defender, now you can let him get forward a little bit more when the time is right. And I think when Atlanta becomes a little more unpredictable in terms of, is it always going to be Brooks that is opening things up? I mean, the guy gets double-digit assists. You want him to open things up. Or is at times Brooks going to tuck inside, and is it going to be Caleb who opens things up? But Caleb does it differently. He likes to make that interior run as opposed to the overlapping run. So it's fascinating. You got a lot of weapons, and with Wiley continuing to develop and figuring out, like, one, just how to play 90 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
That was a challenge for him last year. So much energy, and he'd almost like burned too fast. Now he's finishing games, and he's finishing games in a big way. So this was the game for me that Caleb really showed what he can be, and he needs to be. And John Tolkien's a great player. But when we talk about this Olympic team this summer, there should not be a question about who starts at left back.
Right.
And this is no disrespect to John Tolkien. I think you're blessed to have both, and I think you use both at times because both can push higher up the field. But Caleb Wiley is the best young American left back, period. And if he continues on this trajectory, Greg Berhalter is going to have some decisions to make about Copa America and Olympics. I think Caleb's going to go to the Olympics. He needs to. He needs to play there rather than be rotation, get a little bit of game in Copa America. If he continues developing, he might push that trajectory a little bit further.
So you had it pegged last week with your matchup to watch that involved Caleb and Alejandro Bedoya, who looked like he wanted no part of anything after about 35 minutes. He looked like he had just stepped out of the shower and was being run into the ground. Do you have a matchup in your spot shadow for the upcoming game against FC Cincinnati that involves one player on each side? What matchup are you looking forward to? Anticipated matchup, since obviously you don't have the starting 11s, but what anticipated matchup are you looking forward to the most?
Yeah, I mean, since it's Thursday and the Caleb, well, I can't take all the credit for that because that was 5 minutes into the game that I'm like, wow, okay, one Phillies in their 4-4-2 diamond, which we expected. And Caleb can blow past Bedoya, and he did once. I'm like, that's where the game is, and you got the second goal out of it. So from a broader perspective, I think this game really turns on Lucho Acosta versus the two Atlanta central midfielders in Bartek Slish and Tristan Muyumba. And I don't think it's going to be 1 versus 1. I think at times it's going to need to be Muyumba. At times it's going to need to be Slish dealing with Acosta. Cincy's got some issues. Cincy, and I think you're seeing it. We've talked about this with teams that are very good, and when they look to get better, Columbus in 21 is the example I always think of when after winning MLS Cup in 20 and they improved the roster on paper, they actually regress. Cincinnati might be in the midst of that. They can solve it because they have a lot of talent, but adding Yedlin, adding Miles Robinson, moving the pieces around a little bit. No Junior Moreno, which doesn't sound like, oh, wow, it's going to change everything. It actually is. Alternating between a 3-4-2-1, a 3-5-2, moving Yuya Kubo everywhere. Their shape, their rhythm, their patterns, it's not what it was. And I think it's affecting Acosta more than anyone. Because go back to the last 2 years of Joseph Martinez in Atlanta. One of our big conversations was Joseph dropping. That's where like his game and his career was taking him. He liked dropping to the top of the 18 in build up. He liked dropping in and helping build up the play, which can be a very good weapon. But then your number 10, and for Cincinnati, that's Acosta. For Atlanta, it was Almada, who is comfortable dropping deeper and getting on the ball right in front of the back line and starting the attack there. For Thiago, that's natural. I think he enjoys that. I think it makes him feel alive in the match. Lucho doesn't really enjoy that side of it, and he's a smaller guy. He gets beat up in those areas. He doesn't want to be there. So when Bupenza or Yuya Kubo, who's played as a pseudo 9 at times with this team, when they're in the same space, Acosta's got to go find space. Typically, he's good at doing that out wide. He'll drift out wide. Brad Kazan talked about it on Tuesday. Even when you attack, you got to know where Acosta is because that's who they're going to look to find in the outlet. That space isn't as easy for him to find right now with the new faces because they might have the same dish that they're trying to prepare. I feel like we always go to a food analogy. They might have the same recipe that they're trying to prepare, but they don't have the exact same ingredients. So it comes out a little different. And it's not necessarily vibing right now. So for Atlanta, you've got to make sure that Acosta is dealt with. If you do, since he's not as dangerous going forward, and then I think you can find goals against this team. I really do. I worry about Acosta because it just seems like every time he plays Atlanta, he always kills it.
Yeah. And to your point about finding goals, speaking of goals, it looks like it's going to be Alec Cannon, not Roman Celentano, for another couple of matches.
Evan Loro has gotten a game as well. I would assume it's going to be Alec Cannon. Great opportunity for Alec to play in front of friends and family here in Atlanta, originally from Decatur. Cincy, I want to see what they're made of in these moments because the record over these past couple of games hasn't been great. Can they dial it up in a tough place to play and right the ship a little bit? Or, and I think this is the key for Atlanta, is you got to come out a house of fire against a team that might be questioning itself. And if you do, does Cincinnati have that mental strength? And this is where you go back to a player like Miazga who runs so hot. Does that become a big negative in times of adversity? Sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes that is something that can help fix it. But in this case, I think you want to test that. You want to come out and put them to the sword early and see how they handle it because I'm not sure they handle it well.
Broadcast plans for the weekend.
We are back on 92.9 The Game, 6:30, Five Stripes Countdown with Abe Gordon and Garrett Chapman. Kickoff 7:40. You can listen on Apple TV, MLS Season Pass as well. Once you get to the game broadcast, Mike and myself will have that for you. Full-time report will follow. And then Sunday, Atlanta United 2:30 for pregame with you and with Madison. And then I'll have the call starting at just after 3 o'clock. A weekend of Atlanta versus Skyline Chili FC.
There you go. All right, go to practice.
See ya.